You know, they say grief comes in waves. Sometimes it's a gentle tide that just gets your ankles wet, and other times it's a rogue wave that knocks you flat on your back when you're not looking. But I never expected my grief to come in the form of a woman named Brenda wearing a leopard print scarf and driving a leased Mercedes, demanding the keys to the only thing my grandfather had left to remember him by. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that feels indistinguishable from a Monday, gray and drizzly, the sky pressing down on the rooftops like a wet wool blanket. I was standing in my kitchen, nursing a mug of black coffee that was doing absolutely nothing to wake me up, just staring out the window at the driveway. There she was, gleaming under the street lamp's fading glow, my grandfather Silas's 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1, black jade paint, gold stripe, a beast of a machine that smelled like leaded gasoline and old leather, a car that felt more like a family member than a vehicle. Silas had passed 6 months ago, and every time I turned that key, hearing the 351 Windsor V8 roar to life, it felt like he was sitting right there in the passenger seat, telling me to watch the clutch. My phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating against the granite with a harsh, insect-like sound that made me jump. I picked it up, expecting a text from the school district about a faculty meeting or maybe my mom checking in, but instead, it was a number I didn't recognize, and the message was short, punchy, and completely insane. I know you have the car. It isn't yours. Bring it to 424 Oak Street by noon, or I involve the authorities. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and read it again, assuming I'd lost the ability to comprehend English before 7 a.m. I typed back, "Who is this? I think you have the wrong number," and went back to my coffee, figuring it was a scam or a prank. But 10 seconds later, my phone started ringing. The same number. Against my better judgment, honestly, against every survival instinct I have, I answered. "Hello. Don't play dumb with me, Caleb," a voice shrilled on the other end, scratching at my eardrum like a rusted nail. "I know who you are, I know where you live, and I know you're holding my property hostage." "Who is this?" I asked, my confusion slowly hardening into annoyance. "This is Brenda Halloway," she announced, as if the name was supposed to make me drop to my knees in reverence. I was Silas's neighbor for 15 years. We were very close, and he promised me that Mustang. He told me explicitly, "Brenda, when I go, I want you to have the Mach 1. You're the only one who appreciates the lines on her. So, be a good boy and bring it over. Or do I have to come get it?" I nearly dropped my mug. My grandfather, Silas, was a man of few words, a Korean War vet who treated that car like a holy relic. The idea of him promising it to a neighbor, especially one who sounded like she gargled gravel and entitlement, was laughable. "Lady," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "Silas left that car to me in his will. It's titled in my name. I have the probate paperwork. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to stop." "A will," she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Wills can be forged, Caleb. Undue influence is a real thing. Old men get confused. But a promise? A verbal contract? That holds weight. You bring me my car, or I will ruin you." I hung up. I blocked the number. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of being accused of stealing my own inheritance. I told myself to shake it off, that crazy people exist in the world, and sometimes they get your phone number. So I grabbed my bag, locked the house, and headed out to the driveway to go to work. But the universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and it was a dark one. As I stepped onto the porch, I saw her. It had to be her. She was standing next to the Mustang, one hand resting possessively on the roof, the other hip-cocked in a way that screamed confrontation. She looked like she was in her late 50s, hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde defiance, wearing that leopard print scarf I mentioned earlier. She saw me, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "You," she spat, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "Give me the keys." I walked down the steps, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Get off my property, Brenda. Now." "Not without my car," she shouted, and her voice echoed in the quiet morning air, causing my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, to peer out through his blinds. "Silas loved me. He wanted me to have this. You're just a greedy little grandson who waited for him to die so you could cash in." That hit a nerve. The grief I'd been suppressing flared up into hot, white anger. "Don't you dare talk about him," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You didn't know him. If you knew him, You'd know he'd never give this car to someone who treats people like dirt. Now, step away from the vehicle, or I call the cops. I moved to unlock the driver's side door, and that's when she lunged. She grabbed my forearm with a grip that was shockingly strong, her nails digging into my skin through my dress shirt. "I am taking this car," she screeched, trying to snatch the keys from my hand. I yanked my arm back, stumbling slightly. "That is assault," I yelled, backing away. "You are trespassing, and you just assaulted me. Leave. Now." She stood there, panting, her face flushed a blotchy red, realizing she'd crossed a physical line. She straightened her scarf, regained her composure with terrifying speed, and gave me a look that was pure, distilled malice. "Fine," she hissed. "Do it the hard way. But remember this moment, Caleb. Remember when you had the chance to do the right thing. I'll see you in court, and I'll take the car, the house, and every penny you have for emotional distress." She marched to her Mercedes, slammed the door, and peeled out of my cul-de-sac. I stood there, shaking, looking at the 4 crescent moon indentations her fingernails had left on my arm, and realized this wasn't just a crazy lady. This was a predator. I went to work, but I was a ghost. I'm an English teacher, usually pretty animated, but that day I just let the kids read silently while I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, replaying the scene. Can she actually do this? I wondered. Is there some loophole? Did Silas actually say something to her in a moment of confusion? Doubt is an insidious thing. It creeps in through the cracks of your confidence and rots the foundation. That evening, I was grading papers when the email pinged. Subject: Civil Action, Holloway versus Reed. I opened the attachment. It was a formal lawsuit. She hadn't been bluffing. She was suing me for specific performance of a verbal contract and conversion of property. She was claiming the Mustang was hers, valued at $60,000, and that I had fraudulently concealed the true ownership. I felt like I was going to throw up. I'm a teacher. I make a decent living, but I don't have protracted legal battle money. I barely have fix-the-roof money. I called the only person I knew who could navigate this shark tank, my college roommate, Marcus. Marcus isn't a soft-spoken intellectual like me. Marcus is a personal injury attorney who wears 3-piece suits and smiles like he knows where the bodies are buried because he probably helped dig the holes. "Marcus, I'm in trouble," I said. We met at a diner an hour later. I showed him the paperwork. He read it while chewing on a toothpick, his expression unreadable. "So," Marcus said finally, tossing the papers onto the Formica table. "Who is this Brenda woman?" "Just a neighbor," I said. "Claims Silas promised her the car." "Did he?" Marcus looked me in the eye. "No. He loved that car. He taught me to drive in it. We restored the carburetor together when I was 16. He explicitly put it in the will for me." "Okay," Marcus nodded. "Here's the thing, Caleb. Anyone can sue anyone for anything in this country. I can sue you for looking at me funny. Doesn't mean I'll win. But she's counting on you being scared. She wants you to settle. She figures you'll hand over the keys to avoid the legal fees." "What do we do?" Marcus grinned, and it was a wolfish thing. "We countersue. We file for a dismissal based on the statute of frauds. You can't transfer a vehicle worth this much on a verbal promise without written evidence. And then we dig into Brenda's life. Because people like this, they have patterns. You don't wake up one day and decide to steal a muscle car. You work your way up to it. The next 3 weeks were a living hell. Brenda didn't just wait for court. She went on an offensive campaign. She started posting on the neighborhood Facebook group, which, let's be honest, is the modern-day town square for public shaming, calling me an elder abuser and a thief. I had people I'd known since childhood looking at me sideways at the grocery store. She even showed up at my school one afternoon, standing in the parking lot near the Mustang, taking photos. When the principal, Mr. Davidson, went out to ask her to leave, she started screaming that the school was employing a criminal. I had to sit in Davidson's office and explain that I wasn't stealing cars from old ladies, showing him the probate papers just to keep my job. It was humiliating. I felt like I was being hunted in my own life. But Marcus was busy. He hired a private investigator, a guy named Sal who charged by the hour and smelled like cigar smoke. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, Marcus called me. "Get to my office. Now, you're going to want to see this." When I walked into his office, Marcus was pacing, holding a file folder like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Brenda Holloway," Marcus said, savoring the name. Or should I say, Brenda Miller. Or Brenda St. James. "What?" She's done this before, Caleb. Twice. Marcus slammed the file on the desk. 3 years ago in Ohio, she sued the estate of a deceased boyfriend for a collection of rare coins. Claimed a verbal promise. The family settled just to make her go away. 5 years before that, in Florida, she sued a neighbor's estate for a vintage Steinway piano. Same story. He promised it to me. That time, the judge threw it out, but she dragged it on for 18 months. I stared at the papers. Mugshots, court dockets. She's a professional predator. She's a grief vampire, Marcus corrected. She finds lonely old men, moves into their orbit, waits for them to die, and then pounces on the one thing the family cares about, hoping they'll pay her off. But she made a mistake this time. What? She messed with a guy whose lawyer holds a grudge against bullies. Marcus winked. We're not just going for a dismissal, Caleb. We're going to destroy her credibility. The day of the hearing, the courthouse felt freezing. I was wearing my Sunday best, but I felt small. Brenda walked in with a lawyer who looked like he bought his suit at a discount outlet and regretted it immediately. Brenda, however, was dressed for a funeral, all black, a veil, clutching a tissue. It was a performance. The judge, the Honorable Sarah P. Vance, was a woman with sharp glasses and an expression that suggested she tolerated zero nonsense. We are here for Holloway versus Reed, Judge Vance said, peering over her spectacles. Plaintiff, state your case. Brenda's lawyer, a guy named Mr. Finkel, stood up. He stammered through an opening statement about love, loss, and broken promises. Then, he called Brenda to the stand. She was good, I'll give her that. She cried on cue. She talked about how lonely Silas was, how she was the only one who visited him. A lie. I was there 3 times a week. He told me, Brenda sobbed, dabbing her dry eyes, in the quiet of his kitchen, that the Mustang was too much power for Caleb. He said Caleb was a gentle soul, a teacher, and that the car needed someone with fire. He promised it to me on his deathbed. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Silas died in a hospital, in a coma. He couldn't speak for the last 3 days. Marcus stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket slowly, looking at Brenda like she was a particularly interesting bug he was about to crush. Ms. Holloway, Marcus began, his voice smooth as silk. You say this promise was made on his deathbed. What date was that? November 12th, she said quickly. 2 days before he passed. I see. And you were alone with him? Yes. He held my hand. Marcus walked back to the table and picked up a piece of paper. That's interesting, because I have the hospital logs here. Silas was admitted to the ICU on November 10th. He was intubated and sedated on November 11th. He didn't wake up until he passed on the 14th. So, unless you communicate telepathically, Miss Holloway, how exactly did he make a verbal promise while there was a tube down his throat? The courtroom went dead silent. Brenda's face went from tragic grief to deer-in-headlights panic. Well, maybe I got the date wrong, she stuttered. It was before the hospital. At his house. Ah, the timeline shifts, Marcus said, turning to the judge. Convenient. Let's talk about patterns, Ms. Holloway. Let's talk about the Steinway piano in Florida. Let's talk about the coins in Ohio. Objection, Mr. Finkel shouted, standing up. Relevance. It goes to character and a pattern of fraudulent litigation, Your Honor, Marcus shot back. Judge Vance looked at Brenda, whose mask was slipping. The grieving neighbor was gone. The predator was surfacing. Overruled. Answer the question. Marcus approached the stand, holding up the files from the PI. Did you, or did you not, sue the estate of Arthur Jenkins in 2019 claiming a verbal promise for a coin collection? That was different. Arthur loved me. And did you sue the estate of George Miller in 2015 for a piano? They were trying to cheat me. Brenda screamed, standing up in the witness box, her face contorted in ugly rage. Just like he is. I deserve that car. I put up with that old man's stories for years. I listened to him drone on about the war. I earned that Mustang. It's my payment. The silence that followed was heavy. She had just admitted it. It wasn't love. It was a transaction. She felt she was owed for her time. Marcus looked at the jury box. Well, there wasn't a jury, just the judge, but he looked at the empty seats anyway for effect, and then turned to Judge Vance. No further questions. Judge Vance took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Brenda, who was now breathing heavily. realizing she had just nuked her own case. "Ms. Holloway," the judge said, her voice icy, "not only is your testimony demonstrably false regarding the dates, but you have just admitted in open court that your motivation is transactional, not based on a genuine bequest. Furthermore, the statute of frauds in this state is clear. Real property and vehicles of this value cannot be transferred via verbal promise, even if one existed, which I do not believe it did." The judge slammed her gavel. "Case dismissed with prejudice." "And Mr. Reed," she looked at me, "I am granting your motion for attorney's fees. Ms. Holloway will pay for your legal counsel, and I am issuing a restraining order. If she comes within 500 feet of you or that vehicle, she goes to jail." Brenda looked like she had been slapped. Her lawyer was already packing his briefcase, clearly ready to run for the exit. Brenda turned to me, her eyes filled with venom, opening her mouth to scream something else, but the bailiff stepped forward, hand on his belt, and she clamped her mouth shut. Walking out of that courthouse felt like walking out of a cave into the sunlight. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't hurt. Marcus clapped me on the back. "You did good, kid," he said. "Now, go drive that car." I went home. The Mustang was sitting in the garage, dusty from weeks of neglect, because I had been too afraid to drive it, too afraid to enjoy it while the lawsuit was hanging over my head. I ran my hand over the black jade fender, feeling the cold steel. I got in, turned the key, and listened to the engine catch. That deep, throaty rumble shook the garage. I backed it out into the driveway. As I idled there, letting the engine warm up, I looked across the street. A for sale sign had gone up in Brenda's yard that morning. Apparently, paying my legal fees, which were substantial, meant she had to liquidate some assets. She was standing in her window, watching me. I didn't flip her off. I didn't yell. I just revved the engine, a roar that shook the leaves off the trees, put it in gear, and drove away. I drove out to the old country road where Silas used to take me, the one with the long, straight stretches where you can really open it up. I pushed the pedal down. The speedometer climbed. 60, 70, 80. The wind roared through the open windows, smelling of pine and freedom. I imagined Silas in the passenger seat, grinning, telling me to shift into fourth. "It's ours, Grandpa." I yelled over the engine noise. "It's ours." The nightmare was over, but it left a scar. It taught me that there are people in this world who view grief as an opportunity, people who think they are entitled to the pieces of a life they didn't build. But it also taught me that the truth, when you fight for it, is heavier than any lie. So, here's my question for you guys. Have you ever had someone come out of the woodwork after a family member passed, hand out expecting a payout? Do you think the laws regarding verbal promises should be stricter, or are there cases where they should be honored? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be reading them later, after I get back from taking the Mustang for a wash. She deserves it. Thanks for listening, and keep your keys close.